today's episode of the Sales and Onboarding series. I'm Arushi Pandey and founder's office at AI, and also your host for the conversation today. So, in the last episode, we spoke about embedded AI agents, starting from the fundamentals to their tech and understanding how they work for multi-channel, while delivering the same customer experience throughout. If you want to check it out, it's on our YouTube channel under the playlist Sales and Onboarding. For today, we picked a very different topic. It's something which is not spoken about a lot. From the title, you must have understand it's collections. AI can sell a lot. Everybody talks about conversions, but can it recover is the main question. And that is where we are going to dive in today. So, let me introduce you to the guests for today's conversation. We have Neeraj Kulkarni. He is the co-founder at Collectedge and a former sales head at Udaan Capital. So, Neeraj has seen both selling and recovering at scale. And he's now trying to fix the post-loan that, which is collections and recovery. So, thanks, Neeraj, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And the other guest is also Neeraj, but Neeraj Gupta. He's the co-founder at AI and the CPO. And he has been taking care of all the customer success and conversions and has also been building the product. So thanks, Neeraj, for joining us today.
Thank you, Arisha.
All right. So let's start with the conversation. So, we'll try to understand everything about elections right from the very basic question on what elections is, how it is across India, what has changed, and where AI comes into the picture. So, Neeraj Kulkarni, I'll be taking the surnames as well so that there's no confusion with the
Yeah,
names.
sure.
So, we'll start with Neeraj. You led sales at Udaan, for almost 6 years. And sales is one of the, most intense operations. And now you're building a startup around collections which isn't a very trendy pick. Not a lot of people do that. So what pulled you towards collections as your next big problem to solve?
Yeah. So honestly, like that's the question I have been asked countless time over the last 6 to 8 months. Like, why collections out of all the problems that you could have solved, right? So
Hmm.
I think there is a very genuine reason to it. Like as you mentioned, right? I was fortunate enough to spend around 6 years being part of Udaan Capital, not just in the sales role, but also in a various role that included analytics, process excellence. In my last stint, I was leading sales over there, right? So I was a part of team that actually built the lending business from scratch at Udaan Capital, right? We did multiple iterations throughout the journey, right? And that journey actually gave me an exposure into the full life cycle of credit, right? Which is basically it starts from some sort of lead generation, origination, dispersal, and then collections, right? In that journey, actually, there were a couple of things that became very clear to me, right? One is a well-known fact that India is still significantly an under-penetrated geography or a country when it comes to formal credit, right? And with the kind of economic growth that we are looking at, uh, the credit exposure in this country is only going to increase, right? That is like a hard fact, right? So what essentially this means is that we are at the start of this lending journey as a country, and I think there is a huge scope of whoever is building in this particular area, right, to grow and solve for it. Now, coming to the question of why specifically collections within lending, right? So, lending essentially, rest on three pillars, if I would say that way, right? So, the pillars, as I mentioned earlier, also, it's basically one is the lead generation or origination, right? Where you basically identify who require the loan for whatever use case. You are basically able to give the best offer, you are able to give a best offer to him in terms of interest rate limit and everything. So that essentially is origination lead generation. So I'm sure you might have seen numerous startups in this particular direction, right? So I believe this is one of the area where a lot of fintech bandwidth has gone into over the past 4 to 5 years, right? Then the second one being the underwriting and the risk assessment, right? So there are also multiple players in this particular area. If I name a few, Perfios is there, Karza is there, right? Finbox and many more, right? There are many larger players as well. So again, they have done a really good job in aggregating what all alternate data you can get, what all APIs that you would require to automate and streamline the underwriting process, right? And then obviously there is an ML and AI layer on top of it, which every company builds on top of it, right? To maybe figure out what is the best cohort they can target. So these are the two areas which I believe that it was mostly tapped. Like these were the two pillars which where I can see still a good growth going on and are mostly tapped and it is in right direction. The third one is collections, right? Which is basically the third pillar, but it is actually most often the most ignored in terms of technology and strategic intervention that is required, right? Uh, but if I would, like, I have seen the credit P&Ls very closely, right? And I can assure you that if there is one pillar that actually contributes significantly in improving any company's bottom line, right, is basically if you are able to drive collections in the cost efficient way, and basically if you are able to do it in, you are able to maximize the result by being cost effective, right? So that is something which shapes your P&L really well when it comes to lending, right? So effectively, doing collections in a cost effective and a compliant way, right, is something which has yet to be solved. Is something that I believe. Yes, there are multiple players who are solving in this direction, and the market is huge enough to benefit from each one of them. Yeah. So these are the two primary factors which I think led for us to decide that if there is something that we need to build in fintech, collection should be that space. Yeah.
Got it. So, like, just to summarize what you said, a lot of players are there in lead generation, underwriting, in collections as well. But again, collections is quite ignored, and I mean, there's a lot of potential it has. And um, yeah, again, so, there's a lot of potential it has, and there's a lot that we'll be talking about collections today. So, one thing that I want to ask you is that, of course, you've seen the whole lending cycle and you've been into, in the selling department for so many years. What muscle has it, strengthened in you, which you sort of use here in collections that has really benefited you?
So I think in general, not just for collections, like even in my previous stint at Udaan and now at Collectedge, right, in past few months,
Mm-hmm.
uh, our approach to acquire any customer or to onboard any customer, right, and building product around them has been sort of kind of a very handcrafted approach, if I would say that way, right? What I mean by that is that we actually, in Collectage, we never believe in going after everyone at once. It's not like that, if there are 100 fintechs in HSR, I'm sitting here in HSR right now, and there are like, I don't know, there might be like hundreds of fintechs over here in some way or the other, right? uh, we have some solution that we know that it works, right? But we have actually not gone behind everyone, right, in terms of pitching and getting them onboarded, right? Instead, we pick a very handful of customers, right? Sit down with them, try to understand how we can help them on a day-to-day operations, and then maybe try to fix their problems, right? Once they start seeing the value, once they start trusting us, right, in a way that yes, these people actually are able to help us in streamlining our operations, maximize our results, right? That's when you know we go with our solutions, which we actually intended to, right, and which we believe will be able to significantly impact their outcome, right? Uh, this way, honestly, feels like a bit on a slower side, right? Because as I mentioned that you need to like we actually pick up handful of clients and so on and so forth. But this actually helps us to identify and solve the real problem, right? The problem which the team or the people in this particular domain are actually facing as we speak, right? Uh, and you know, instead of going with a solution, with a pre-cooked kind of solution, and then basically searching for a problem, this is the approach which has actually helped us to build the right solution for whichever lenders or whichever corporates we have been working till now, right? So this has actually helped us a lot in terms of shaping our products that we have built so far, and actually refining sort of our sales pitch when we go to sell to any enterprise client as such. Yeah,
Right. So when we are talking about product, I'm sure you must have really seen how the industry has changed over the years. So let's zoom out for a moment, and because you've seen the space operationally and now from a builder's lens. If we look at the industry for the past 5 or 10 years, we can also take into account COVID. Do Are there things that have genuinely changed, or and are there things which are still, operating like we're in 2012 or 13?
yeah. Actually, fair question, right? So, to really understand that, what I believe is that we need to take a step back. When I say that, what I mean is that if we try to compare collections, like how it happens today and maybe how it used to happen 10 to 12 years back, honestly, that is like comparing apples and oranges, right? Because entire fabric of lending has shifted significantly in last 10 to 12 years, right? So back then, if I speak about, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was in college or school at that point of time. But yeah, I very specifically remember, that most of the banks and NBFCs followed a very traditional branch-led model, right? Uh, Everything from customer onboarding, underwriting to collections, right, was deeply local, right? You had teams on ground who knew the region, understood the borrower's context, right, and then had more granular and almost instinctive intelligence on them, right? So that was the model which was there, I think, pre 2015 or in fact pre 2017. That was mostly the model, right? The branch led model, local model, right? Fast forward to now, lending has gone digital, right? Even the large banks are disbursing money on click of the button, right? There is no geographical constraint anymore. Banks, NBFCs, or fintechs don't actually assess that do I have a physical presence over there? Do I have a branch over there before disbursing the loan, right? Uh, it has become completely app first, data driven, and massively scalable, right? But here's the interesting part, right? So while these organizations have become borderless and automated, but actually collections still requires some sort of local precision, right? Uh, yes, early stage delinquencies, maybe early DPDs, can be handled digitally to some extent, right? That is where we have seen most of the technology solutions coming in last 2 to 3 years, right?
Mhm.
But when it comes to a tougher late stage recovery, right, you need to have a very strong local precision. Basically, you need to have local people on ground, right? That local understanding, that human touch is still critical, right? So in many way, collection still today is straddling between the two worlds, right? One that has evolved rapidly in terms of technology and which is mostly around the early stage of delinquencies, right? Where we have discovered many more digital channels such as WhatsApp, SMS, calls, and whatnot, right? In terms of getting early DPD sorted, and that mainly aligns with the digital approach that banks and NBFCs have. But when it comes to actually controlling the NPAs, you still require a local precision, right? And that's where, I believe that things are still running the way it used to run maybe 10, 12, 13, 14 years back. And in fact, that has got disrupted in a negative way. Earlier, you had a local intelligence from a bank or NBFC point of view as well, right? So you were able to handle that local manpower of sorts in a very effective way. Now, since that is not there, so in fact, I believe the late stage DPD operations has taken a hit of sorts. Yeah.
Quite a lot has changed. I just want to follow up on that part where you said, a lot of things, especially for collection in the early stage and the later stage, things are a bit different. So what you're saying is that humans, still need to be involved in the later stage of the collection process, is what you're trying to say. Correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah, like that has been my read till now, right? Because I think we can cover that into much more detail, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what I feel is that there are essentially three reasons why a customer can default, right? Or default or
Mm-hmm.
delay the payment. One can be an intent, second can be a capability, third can be a dispute, right?
Right.
Uh, so maybe capability can be solved with time. Dispute can be solved by your proactive approach. But intent is something, or even capability, right? Both of these things can be solved if you have a kind of a face to your organization in terms of collections, right? Because I'll be very straightforward here, right?
Yeah.
Imagine you as a borrower, right? If you have 10 rupees in your pocket, right? And if you have to pay an EMI or repayment of 20 rupees to maybe three lenders, whom would you pay first, right?
The one who is the most, scary or arrogant one, of
I would
course.
not say scary or arrogant. That luckily and honestly, RBI is taking care of it, that these things don't happen. But maybe a bank or institution that is following up with you via multiple channels in the most effective way, right? Because you know that if you have 10 rupees in your pocket and if you have to pay someone, you will always pay to a person or a bank or an NBFC, uh, whom you know that, if I fail to, stick to my promise, right? He'll again come to my door and say that, sir, you said that you will pay and you are not paid till now, right? Versus a voice bot calling you at even every hour, right? It might not matter
Yeah.
much. And this I'm specifically talking about late stage DPDs, right? Early stage is all about reminders, right? That I also believe that can be solved digitally. Yeah.
Fair, fair, quite fair. So when you're talking about, how people um, interact with collectors, what differences, have you come across in tier one cities versus tier two and tier three cities? How do the users behave differently when it comes to recovery? Is there a trust or a tech gap? What are the major differences? And which one is relatively easier compared to the other one?
So actually both tier one and tier two, tier three, right? If I put tier one in one bucket and tier two, tier three and beyond in one bucket, right? So I think both of these buckets have their own pros and cons, right? At least basis my experience. First of all, like before I jump into it, right? I believe that with the digital sort of India that is being built right now, the gap in terms of this tier one, tier two, tier three is rapidly narrowing, right? At least in terms of awareness, how to handle the technology, how to do the digital payments, etc., etc., right? Uh, but if we zoom in a bit, right, there are still two areas where I believe differences come up, right? Uh, the first one again is still in the tech and awareness front, right? Tier one cities, borrowers in tier one cities they generally have better understanding of how delay in repayment can impact their CIBIL credit worthiness, right? So they tend to be more proactive in terms of interacting with the digital nudges, right? They will respond you back if there is a genuine issue, right? They'll address the follow-ups that you are doing, right? And on top of that, they are also very well informed about their rights as a borrower, right? Which changes how they engage with you in the process, right? You cannot be, as you mentioned, right? Whoever is scary, like they make sure that you are not
Yeah,
scary,
exactly.
right? So they know their rights, right? And which is a good thing, right? But this entire thing flips when it comes to a physical traceability kind of thing, right? So in tier two and tier three, at least basis my experience, we have seen that you are more likely to find a borrower at their given address in these smaller towns, right?
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
And the reason is quite simple, right? Tier 1 cities have large migrant population, a lot of renters who tend to move frequently, right? Sometimes multiple times within a span of a single loan tenure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that creates a major challenge in tracking them down in person to drive the recovery efforts in tier 1 cities, right? Versus in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, people are more, they actually own that house, they own that place. People in locality know that person, right? If you are trying to have a, kind of engage with them in terms of negotiation and of sorts, they will be more welcoming in that on that front, right? So yeah, if you are looking for more of a from an awareness and a digital touch point kind of thing, then obviously tier 1 borrowers are much better to target. They are much proactive in terms of responding you, right? But when it comes to solving for the late DPDs, surprisingly, we have seen much better traceability in the smaller towns. Obviously, that has its own challenge because even if customers are traceable, you might not have fleet on street to trace them or to go and visit them because
Mm-hmm.
again the density is a problem in a smaller towns, right? But if you are able to build that density, then yeah, I think solving those issues and customers would be more easier compared to the tier 1 cities. Yeah.
Look, this is a very interesting fact actually that, in urban cities, of course, people are more aware, but locating them is a problem versus, in tier two, three cities where they might not be very aware, but locating them is easier, relatively. Um, Now that we've spoken about, differences in different cities, let's narrow down into two specific products for collections. One is personal loans and the other is business loans. So are the playbooks different, or are we applying, one model to two different users? How is it for both of these financial products?
So I think as I mentioned like a few minutes back, right? First of all, right, when you talk about approach, right, in terms of
Uh-huh.
collections, it is very much important to understand why someone would default, right, or why someone will go delinquent, right? As I mentioned that there are just three broader reasons: intent, capability, and dispute, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so irrespective of if it is a personal loan or business loan, the reason stays the same. It is one of these three reasons, right? So actually, from a reasoning point of view, nothing changes much, right?
Okay.
Now, while the underlying reasons are quite similar, the approach to collection actually differs significantly based on the type of loan and whom you are dealing with, right? From the customer side. For example, if it is a secured or an asset-backed loan, right? Your recovery strategy, the manpower that you will deploy for an asset-backed loan, will have a completely different skill set, right? They'll be very
Right.
different from an unsecured one, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Similarly, dealing with an individual borrower. Now, that individual borrower, be it for a personal loan or a business loan, right? Like business loan can also be an individual loan. Imagine
Yes.
someone taking up a loan of 20 lakh for renovating his shop, right? It's still a proprietor, it's still a business loan. He took it against his business numbers, his income tax returns, or whatever, right? But you are still dealing with that individual person, right? So, nothing much changes in between a personal and business loan when you are interacting with an individual person, right? In terms of approach, traceability, and all those sort of things. Uh,
Mhm.
Whereas, there is a very huge difference uh, when you are engaging with the real businesses, right? When you talk about business loan and when you are actually interacting with a real business within it. By real business, what I mean is where you are maybe interacting with the whole finance team of a certain org, or you are interacting with multiple CXOs in a structured organization,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and with business, you often enter into a world of trade disputes, reconciliation issues, payment delays. Some calamity came up for a particular duration. A season was off for farming. There are like plenty of reasons that can go off, right? And when you are dealing with multiple people within the organization, they will have their own hierarchy, they will have their own approvals, right? They will have a problem where some person who was taking care of that loan and repayments have moved out, and no one else in that organization is aware of it, right? There are these kind of instances that come up when we are dealing with trade credit kind of things, right? So this is where the playbook is completely different when you compare with a personal loan or a business loan that was taken by an individual. Here you need to have people with a completely different skill set, right? You need to have a person who is better negotiator, right? Who can
Mm-hmm.
understand ledgers, finances in a better way, who can understand the trade cycles of that particular industry in a better way, right? Because that is the person who will be able to better negotiate the revised timeline of repayment of sorts, right? So yeah, that is a completely different skill set, right? And that is basically linked to the recovery of an account receivable, right? So that is one complete different skill set. But when I talk about a personal loan or an individual who took a business loan, maybe the strategy and all those things are quite similar. Obviously, there will be a similar angle to it for a business loan from like trade dispute season and everything, but it can be directly compared with a similar kind of scenarios at the personal front as well. Like someone can have a medical issue, someone will have maybe a job loss, right? So the issues are similar, right? The difference is more around, are you interacting with a single party or are you interacting with multiple party of the same organization, and what are the
Mm-hmm.
complexities of the issues that you can come around when you are trying to resolve an account. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So, all right. Otherwise, the approach might be similar, but when you're going at the organization level, when you're actually collecting, that is
Yeah.
where a lot of differences occur.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering that, Neeraj, like quite in depth. I'm sure a lot of people, who are viewing the conversation might not know that, but thanks for pointing it out. Now, Neeraj Gupta, yes, you've been working very closely with onboarding, digital onboarding, and you've worked with different players from different cities. When you see the user behavior, in urban cities versus smaller towns, especially around their financial decisions, what stands out the most for you?
Hmm. So yeah, I think at Revrac we have been deploying these agents across the fintechs, right? Fintechs who where like whose major portfolio is in tier three, tier four towns, right? Versus
Mhm.
fintechs whose major portfolio, let's say, is in tier one, tier two towns. I think in my experience, one very clear thing comes is trust and digital literacy, right? So they both move in opposite directions across metros and tier two, tier three towns, right? So, for example,
Yeah,
in metros, a user has very low patience but high comfort with apps and systems. So, for example, if UX UI is buggy, right, or it's slightly robotic, for example, in case of the AI calling agents, right? So the chances are that like they will hang up, right, or they will drop off instantly, right? But at the same time, you will see them doing a UPI transaction of 50,000 rupees, right,
hmm,
instantly, right? So that is in their mental models, right? So, but if we look at the counterparts, so for example, tier two, tier three, or tier four towns, right, of the Bharat population, right? Users take longer to trust, right? But once they do, their engagement is deeper of sort, right? Here, what
right.
matters is not probably the speed, but reassurance, right? They want the reassurance that like you are here to stay, right? So they take longer time, right? But once they come into the system, they are there for a longer time, I would say, right? That's why when we have been building our AI agents in the vernacular languages, right, as well. So while deploying these, especially for let's say Kannada or Marathi or basically for the regional languages, the kind of conversations if you hear or listen, right? So from tier one versus tier two, tier three towns, those are completely different, right? So just to
Okay.
give you some quantitative numbers as well, right? So if we give a onboarding call to let's say a tier one customer or the user, their average call is typically 3 to 4 minutes, for example, or 5 minutes at max, right? While for the
Yeah.
tier 3 and tier 4 it goes up to 12 minutes or 15 minutes, right? So that supports basically the argument which I was saying that like tier 3, tier 4 towns, people are in the reassurance mode, right? They want to reassure again and again, right? And this is where I
Mm-hmm.
think that these AI agents have the advantage as well, right? So for example, from the collections perspective as well, right? They can call early, and I am a person who fundamentally believe that like these AI agents can add lot of value in the early collections rather than the late collections, right? So in the early collections, I believe the overall game is recovery acts as a guidance rather than confrontation, right? So yeah,
Okay.
so obviously like these are the main difference versus from tier 1 versus tier 3, tier 4, and then taking this to the collections as well. And if you look from the AI agents perspective as well, right? So we have been continuously getting lot of values, lot of learnings as well.
Mhm. That was a really nice insight that you brought up on how people, you know, are on call in urban areas versus in
Yeah.
tier three and four areas. Um, now that we've spoken a lot about user behavior in different cities, I want to understand, what things in collections are solved and which are not solved. So, Neeraj Kulkarni, this one's for you. Uh, what do you think in collections is mostly solved now and what is not? Could be a tech process or probably behavioral shifts. And what are the real headaches which no one or not many people have figured out yet, or the tech still struggles with?
Yeah. So I think uh, it's actually a difficult question when you ask what is the thing that has mostly solved now, right? Because
Uh-huh.
I would say while we are not, I don't think we are fully done with any part of collections. Like
Mhm.
I'm sure there are many large companies who have built business over collections in past few years, right? And I'm sure that they would also have a same sort of meetings, right, in the same direction every day. I'm very sure about that. That we are still miles away from solving even one single piece in collections, right? Uh, yes, there have been some changes. There have been some improvements. As I mentioned, there have been some improvements on the digital side of things, right? Uh, but the pace of that change and the real adoption of that change into the regular operations has been very slow, right? One is that you basically design a template and send it to a customer, right? So that your so and so amount is due today. This will impact your CIBIL. Please repay on time, right? I know from last 5 to 6 years there are like almost all companies send this type of messages, right? But are you
Right.
able to, maybe get the right feedback from the customer and then maybe use it in terms of your prioritization, figuring out whom to target, when to target, how to target, those kind of things are still not solved on the digital front, right? On the late stage of the recovery, it's like completely, as I mentioned in even in our previous discussion, that I still believe that the late stage recovery, the field effectiveness and all those sort of things, I don't see a very major shift in that direction, right? That said, one area where we have seen a real and tangible progress is around the ethical and compliant recovery practices, right? And this shift has been largely driven by RBI's regulatory frameworks, right? That has appeared over last few years, right? Uh, and it's no longer just about the recovery rates, right? It's also about how you recover and whether it stands up to the scrutiny which you will have if you don't follow that, right?
Okay.
So, I specifically have a lot of conversations with the local and regional agencies, right? And
Mhm.
everyone echoes the same fact, right? Everyone says that, life was simpler 10 to 15 years ago as a recovery agency, right? There used to be just one simple question कि कितना मिला है और month end तक कितना आएगा, right? And
Mhm.
we used to drive our operations that way, right? Now this has become the operations has become multi-dimensional, right? Now even if the lender is giving you a cohort for recovery, right? It's not just that you have to bring in money, it's also about how genuine your effort was, right? If you made an effort on field or on call, was your language up to the mark, right? If you are out for a field visit, were you well dressed, right? Even that is something which is very important. And if you are calling to a customer, are you calling after 7 p.m.? Are you calling before, let's say, 8 a.m., right? All those kind of things have come into the picture, right? So, and it is actually a good thing, right? Because now,
Exactly.
yeah, at this, like now the borrowers themselves have become so much aware of their rights. They now know what kind of behavior is acceptable, right? They
Right.
are now more willing to push back if those lines are crossed, right? So this combination, regulatory pressure on one side and consumer awareness on the other side, right, is forcing lenders to think of different approach, right? They are more welcoming towards integrating tech-enabled, process-driven, strategic recovery models into their operations now, because they know that the way it used to work earlier, it is not going to work anymore, right? So that is
Mhm.
one behavioral shift I see happening, which thanks to RBI, like which has happened over the past few years. Yeah, that has something which has changed.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. So, all of these changes, that RBI has made, has really worked in favor of the customer, or the way the amount is recovered from them in a very ethical, very legal way. I mean, you just mentioned, right? You spoke to a lot of agencies in different cities, and they said it was much easier 10 or 12 years back because was it because people were not very aware, or there were not a lot of legal provisions to monitor each and every step these lenders were taking to recover money from the borrowers?
So I think there are two reasons, the both reasons, in fact. One was that, the technology interventions were minimal, right? So even if you
Mm-hmm.
would want to track something, you are not able to track, right? As a regulator, right? Now with technology coming into the picture, all sorts of tracking, be it audio, video, textual, location based, whatever it is, time based, all those tools are now easily available, right? Now regulator also knows that all of the lenders have incorporated these things into their system, right? So it has become much more convenient and easy to basically monitor all these things. And once you start monitoring all these things, you identify more and more problems into it, right? When you are
Right.
not actually tracking something, so it's a normal thing, no, not just with collections. Even if you are doing a simple
Right.
business, if you are not tracking your numbers, you would believe sab badhiya chal raha hai, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as and when you start tracking, right, your inventory, your quality, your expiry dates, even if you are doing a restaurant business or whatever, right, you will realize that this is something which I can improve to better my margins, right? That is like one just separate example that I can see.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I think one of the reason is that this tracking and all this stuff has improved significantly over past few years. And second thing, I think, which you mentioned, right,
Mm-hmm.
that all of these things are in borrowers' favor. I believe yes, while they are in borrowers' favor, but I think in a way, at least as of now, I don't know about the future. Obviously I see that there needs to be some lender specific solutions as well, right? Because as I mentioned, one of the biggest problem in lending industry is skip tracing, right? Skip tracing is basically finding a customer, right, finding his right number or right address if he is not available at a
Wow.
location which he gave to you at the time of disbursal, right? So that is one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest problem I would say right now in the recovery industry. Right now, there is no tool, there is no way where a kind of a central repository or stuff available with these collection operations, kind of muscle, where they can actually go and maybe figure out how should I get connected to a right customer, right? So there are many things which needs to be solved for lender, but whatever has been solved for a borrower, I believe that RBI has rightly pushed lenders, recovery agencies, customers all in a right direction, right? They have made everyone accountable.
Mm-hmm.
They have actually motivated everyone to adopt the right practices on both technology and operations front.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is definitely the correct step. More records, better monitoring. Like, everybody knows what's happening, and again, transparency is what helps eventually. Uh, Neeraj Gupta, I have one question for you. You've been fine tuning the agents to improve conversions, for different use cases in onboarding. If you had to translate one core principle from onboarding into the world of collections, what would it be? And what can probably people in collection learn from the way you have handled, you've seen being handled nudges and frictions in onboarding.
Hmm. So I think the best answer I think can be given by Neeraj Kulkarni, but I can attempt on this, right?
Uh-huh.
Since I have worked on both the verticals in my previous stints, so I think if you see a typical onboarding, right? So I think for the lack of better word, there is a momentum, and plus onboarding is always rewards driven, right? Indirectly. So for example, before dispersal there are 6 steps per se, right? So you keep on motivating these users that like, hey, bravo, you have completed the KYC, just 2 more steps are remaining, right? So I think that the similar pattern is missing on the collection side, and that could be one of the things which can be incorporated in collection. So for example, in onboarding we design flows to reward the actions. You upload your pan, right? We say great, maybe step 1 is completed, right? So a small dopamine hit keep user going on, right? So collections, especially in India, I think does the opposite, right? The first nudge is more often is sounds legal, right? Hey, if you don't pay by so and so date, right, you will be penalized, for example, right? So,
Yes.
but I think that the approach could be different, right? So maybe, hey Arushi, you are just one EMI away from being fully caught up, right? Can I help you with today, right? Or exactly what kind of reminder do you want before the due date, right? So those sort of things, right? And also when we talk about the early stage collections, this kind of tone works wonder in the first 15 to 30 days, right? The user is often willing, you can say, right? And it simply needs the nudge, right? And this is where our experience have been with these AI agents, that like they work perfectly, right? So like I mentioned earlier as well, DPD less than 30 days, right? That is where you can, the problem more of a the problem is more from the, if it is not from the intent perspective, right? So then it can be
Mm-hmm.
solved. And just like Neeraj Kulkarni also mentioned, right, it can be majorly solved by the reminders. And there mostly you need to work out with the customer. So for example, naturally individual can fall into some problems, right? Maybe salary is delayed, or maybe some other expenses have come into the place, right? You just need to understand. So uh, you just need to talk to them, understand from them that like, is it a intentional or not intentional? If it is intentional, that needs to be taken care by different strategies. And if it is non-intentional, right, it has to be taken care in a very sophisticated manner. So I think when what I have seen in the past tense, right, there has not been much differentiation, right, between these two approaches. Obviously maybe because the kind of the volume they had, or those were the early days when RBI was also not very strict, right? But like Neeraj Kulkarni mentioned, right, I think in past 5 years, the way we collect, the way lender collects, right, it has become very, very sophisticated and very user centric, I would say. Very, very much borrower centric. If you try to compare 2015,
Yeah.
16, 17, right, versus 2025, right? So I believe that like, and just one thing to share, that like during my first instant, I used to work for a UK payday lender, right? So they are much ahead in the lending perspective if you compare to India, right? So just like RBI, they have FCA, Financial Conduct Authority. So they are so much customer centric, right, that like over the phone you cannot cross the limits, right? Let's say if you are talking over the phone, right, just for the reminders or anything, you cannot simply cross the limit, right? So they have very,
Mm-hmm.
very strict rules. So during that time also we used to say that like, maybe in India also, RBI or like the similar regulatory entity will bring the similar thing, right? So yeah, I think Coming back, I think I mentioned something else, but the main point is like from the just to reiterate, from the onboarding and versus from the onboarding and the collections perspective, I would say there is a empathy which is missing, right? Which we try to show at the time of the onboarding, because that is the time when
Mhm.
we are kind of getting the revenue. I think if the same frequency is maintained at least till the point of early DPDs or till 30 DPD, I think that would really help.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting comparison, right? When you are helping them in onboarding, they get this dopamine hit, Now they're on the next level. But while again in collections, whenever you send them the nudge, it's the opposite reaction. So,
Yeah.
like Neeraj Kulkarni also mentioned, there have been a lot of things in favor of borrowers. Uh, Probably lenders now have to be more creative in terms of how they can, within the framework, you know, try to recover as much as possible. And there's a lot of reforms that also need to be made in support in favor of the lenders. Now, let's jump into a bit of AI. Neeraj Kulkarni, I want to understand from your perspective in collections. Are there any uh, areas where AI has already been integrated, or you think AI could work, or hasn't worked, could work? What are your views on AI specifically in collections right now and probably in the future, the next 3 4 years?
Um, yeah, I think we are too early into this, I believe, right? Because the recovery market I see out there, and maybe
Uh-huh.
compared to that, the AI intervention, if I specifically talk about AI agents for now, let's keep aside all the other AI interventions in data and everything. If I just talk
Uh-huh.
about AI agents, I don't think it would be even a one complete percentage of deployment that has happened till now, right?
All right.
Uh, I know for a fact that all of the large banks, NBFCs, and everyone, they are still working either with their in-house teams, in-house calling teams for the early DPDs. They have some early digital nudges through WhatsApp, SMS, right? And if it is still not resolved, maybe by the fifth or sixth day of the EMI bounce, the case goes to some local recovery agency, right? Who then have an hybrid approach of either calling or visiting the customer, right? So the AI adoption is still in a very early phase right now, right? But obviously, that is also a fact that there has been a large storm of AI voice and WhatsApp agents in last few months, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, if you remember, I talked about now just coming back to the point where it can be helpful, or where I see on an immediate basis this can very well be deployed, right? If you remember, I talked about the three reasons of non-repayment, right? Which is intent,
Mhm.
capability, dispute, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happens is that today, what happens is that you know the clear segregation of each case into one of these three bucket actually doesn't happen very well, right? Uh, Even if it happens, usually it surfaces when the case has reached to an NPA stage. Let's say a customer had a genuine dispute, right?
Mhm.
The early agents or the early interventions are trained in such a way that their whole intent is just to collect the money. The call center agent is not even well equipped to understand the issue and maybe help the customer on solving that issue, right? They don't have any SOP around it, right? All they know is that there are 10,000 rupees which are due with this customer, and by the end of this month, I need to get this 10,000 rupees, right?
Mhm.
So, where I think AI can help is that AI agents being interactive enough, being realistic enough, they can very well structurally capture these inputs from the customer, right? Convert into it into a sort of actionable insight or actionable dispositions, and basically serve it in front of whoever the process manager, program manager of a lender is, right? That you have, let's say, 100 customers who have not paid you on the EMI date, and out of these 100, I don't know about 80, but these are the 20 customers where they have a genuine issue. It can be a capability issue that, he has some health issue, there was some sudden expense, or there is some genuine dispute with the process that you had, or there had been some mis-selling that has happened from the lender's end. And you need to treat these 20 cases separately and let's problem solve and resolve it, right? Rather than pushing these 20 cases also in that pipeline of recovery. Because once you push these people who have genuine issue into a recovery funnel, they tend to become more kind of repulsive in terms of repaying you back, because then they'll say that this and these things have happened me over the period of last 2 months. No one responded me well. Now I'm not going to pay you back, right? These are the instances that happens very generally. It's a basic human nature, right? So I think AI, the interactive AI, a very well designed interactive AI agent can help you surface the issues very early into the delinquency journey, right? And the lenders can very easily take very clean and proactive steps in resolving those issues, right? uh, then there would be some cases where it's just that a customer is taking maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 extra days for some or the other reason. Again, a general simple reminder works wonder over there, right? You don't even need AI over there. If you just keep on reminding a customer twice or thrice in a couple of weeks that you have so and so amount due, as soon as the customer gets time and the money in his bank account, he'll be paying you back, right? And then there is a third cohort where you need to go into a late stage recovery process, where I believe that AI can be an enabler in a way that they can help you surface a better cases in terms of targeting by summarizing what has happened in past with these cases, right? They can assist you in capturing the accurate information, right? But maybe if you ask me, can the AI bot, if a customer is at 90 DPD, and if an AI bot can independently solve an issue end to end, if it is a dispute, if it is a very sophisticated capability issue, I still believe that there is still some human empathy which is needed over there, human intelligence, human empathy is which is needed over there. Yeah.
From the answer that you gave, I found them very in that, uh, in the early stages of collection, early DPD days, probably where you have to send that just reminders, AI agents can definitely come into play. But Neeraj Gupta, we know that the AI agents that are used at RevRag.ai are very context aware. So if these agents are, incorporated right from the onboarding process into the digital flow, and the flow continues. So what I'm trying to say is that if the whole onboarding flow already has AI agents working in it, and AI agents are also incorporated in the collections flow, versus a case where AI agents are only in the collections flow, it would be much better, right? The agents would have a lot of context around the customers and they would be able to form better. What are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, I think Arushi, it's a great question. So I will tell you that and then Neeraj Kulkarni can also give his thoughts on this, right? So for example,
Mm-hmm.
while interacting with lot of fintechs, right, the common challenge with the analytics team, which uh, works independently or under the risk team, right? They have always this, uh, challenge of data, right, or the insights, right? So I will tell you. So for example, till the AI or before the LLMs, I can say, right, there were not much data from the call center perspective which can be consumed by the business teams, right? So for example, there are two verticals. One is obviously, let's say, the collection analytics, which is leveraging maybe the past repayment data, or the credit data, or sometimes the mixed panel data, but they don't have any visibility of whatever conversations which has been happening on their call centers, right? Or whatever been happening with the whatever might be the conversations which has happened in the past, right, per se, right? So I genuinely believe that, like, now with the cheaper and the efficient LLMs, right? We have the capability of decoding those conversations and put those as insights into those so-called analytics model, or basically the collections model, or the propensity to pay model, whatever model you want to say, right? So now there is a possibility to bridge it via these data, right? So definitely, if these AI agents are sitting on your onboarding, so let's consider a lender, right, who uses AI agents for their onboarding, and then at the same time, they are also using AI agents for the collections, for example, right?
Mhm.
Now, uh, considering they both are being operated by the same firm, or like they have the context of each other, right? So they can
Yeah.
leverage the data. So just to give you an example, right? So let's say during the onboarding, this agent has this information that like at the time of the KYC, this guy did probably he has completed the onboarding in fourth attempt, right? And it took more than 2x time than the 2x time than our good customers, right? Or basically, before giving us the PAN or the KYC documents, he tried 3 times, 4 times, right? Maybe because he was hesitant, right? Now those kind of insights you can try to use in collections as well. So for example, if somebody was confused or hesitant or had certain confusions, right, during the onboarding, right, there is a good probability that like they might still be confused or hesitant, or might be confused, or anything which causes ambiguity to these customers during the early collections as well, right? Now if the agents have the context of the same, right? So as we all know that like in the collections, the beauty lies that like which 20 customers or the users we have to target. We don't have to target those 100 users, right? We have to target those 20 users, right? So in those 20 users, can we identify certain characteristics, right, which was peculiar or standing out during the onboarding, and we can leverage the same while collecting the while doing the early collections. So I think this is the area which is completely white spaced, or nobody has
Mm.
kind of experimented. The max experiments have happened is basically till this point of time, lenders have been using mixed panel to understand the user behavior, clicks, and all those things. And underwriting teams have tried to basically use those signals in the underwriting, but unfortunately they were not able to deliver anything, or basically nothing significant came out of those models, right? Hardly one or two things would have come in, but nothing significant per se, right, on a consistent basis, right? So those models might
Mhm.
have worked for, let's say, 6 months, but you wouldn't see that like evergreen variable is getting into plugged in the logistic regression, and it is going on, right? So I think now there is
Yeah.
a possibility of getting a alternate data, right, which is directly coming from these agents, right, be it from the voice or be it from the these user behavior over the app. But I still feel there will be a very good synergy between these two functions, which is yet to be explored.
Right. Right. No, that was actually very interesting. I mean, apart from automating things using AI, the actual collection of data and using it is the real use case that should be properly used and extracted. Any thoughts on this, Neeraj Kulkarni?
Yeah, yeah,
Before we
I
continue.
completely agree. As I earlier also mentioned, right, that
Right.
one is, creating a fancy AI bot, right, who can interact very well, who is more, who has more human-like voice and, tone and everything, right? That is just one part of it, right? But even if you have that, and if you are not actually converting it into an actionable data, that's of no use, right? You will
Yeah.
just have conversation, and the effectiveness of that particular channel, if you are not leveraging the data, the effectiveness of that channel will be as good as just sending a WhatsApp nudge, right? It will not do anything more
Right.
than that, right? It's just saying that, hey, you have so and so amount of due, right? And you need to pay that back. Now, even if you have a 2 or 2.5 minute of that call, right? And if you are not able to take any action on top of it, I'll just give you a very simple example, right? So, a few days ago, right, while talking to one of the lender, I came across a problem statement where they were saying that, there was some fraud that happened in one of the geography where one of our anchor partner, um, you know, uh, he was not a genuine guy, right? Like he was not actually a genuine business, and he actually borrowed money on the borrower's PAN card or Aadhaar card, right? And that particular borrower is now liable to pay. Now, when we are reaching out to that borrower, they are saying that we never took a loan, right? And all of them can be tied back to a same anchor, right? So now they know that this is the anchor who might have done some sort of, these kind of fraud, right? Now they are getting to know about this when the case has gone to a late stage agency, right? Maybe in an NPA stage, right? Now imagine that if there was a very active and intelligent AI bot sitting at the early stage, right? And if he would have called up or sent a WhatsApp message for a first EMI, let's say, right? And if even two or three customers would have messaged that I have never taken this account, I have never taken this loan, I'm not liable to pay, right? And if this insight would have come up in front of the lender, I'm sure they would have taken some action right at that point of time, right? They might have not waited for 3 months. They might have not waited for more frauds to happen by the same guy, right? The fraud size would have also got limited, right? So these are the kind of scenarios where I believe that if the AI and the data intelligence on top of it is leveraged in the right way, we'll be able to, get a lot of improvements, right, in terms of the process that we run.
No, absolutely agreed. And that was a very nice use case of AI to
Yeah.
detect fraud in the early stages. I think we've mostly covered all of the pointers, and now we are coming to the closure of this conversation. Firstly, thanks to the both of you for taking out time to discuss about collections, AI, and how collections have taken they have evolved the past 5 to 10 years, and how the differences are amongst different cities and products. My last question to you, Neeraj Kulkarni, would be just on the closing remarks, if there's any word of advice or something you would give to probably a founder building in collections, or trying to integrate AI into it, any advice, or what would you like
So,
to say to that
yeah, it's too
person?
early to give any sort of advice for me to anyone. But
But
yeah, yeah.
probably.
So I think for myself and maybe for all the fellow founders who are building in the same space, I think what I genuinely feel and believe is that, uh, the collections industry has been working in a certain way for a very long time now, right? Like years and years, decades, I would say it has been operating in the same way. And when I say collections org, it's mostly the operational org that I'm talking about, right? So they have been working in a certain way for a very long time, right? So when you know that there are solutions that can help them, right? Uh, but the moment you go to them with your predefined solution, right? Knock their doors and say, hey, this is the solution which is going to change collections for you. Uh, it's very highly likely that they are either not going to trust you, right? Or they are going to maybe say that this is a far-fetched solution. We have been doing this in a certain way, and you can't just come and knock our doors and say that, whatever you have been doing, it's a thing of past, and you need to change immediately, right? So what I'm trying to say is that whoever is trying to build in this space, right? I strongly believe that everyone need to work very closely with the real collection managers or collection agencies who have been working in this space for a very long time. Maybe try to understand how they have operated, how they have worked, how you can genuinely help them, and then maybe take a step by step kind of incremental improvements in terms of revamping the process rather than going and disrupting the process, in a day, right? It's not going to happen, right? It's a high touch base operations, right? You can't just go in a day and say that, late stage recovery, mein, there's no need of any field visit, or there is no need of having such a lengthy operational org, right? I can just deploy a bot in a day and I can have a same recovery percentage, right? So that's not a realistic expectation to set, right? So maybe I think we need to be very real over here. We need to understand how things have worked over past. See, there are industries like e-commerce, or maybe entertainment industry, Netflix, and all these kind of things, where we ourselves are consumers, right? So if we are building in that space, you can say that me and 10 of my friends think that this is a problem and this needs to be solved, right? So you already have, like, you are the consumer, right? You know what needs to be improved. Maybe there you have some say, right? But this is a completely different territory, right? Most of the people have not gone into that collection cycle themselves, right? And which is a good thing that they have not gone into it, right? uh, so they need to first understand that what are the things that lead a person to that stage, how you need to be more empathetic, how you need to be more realistic from a consumer side. From a collections outside, you need to be more realistic in terms of why they have been doing certain thing in a certain way. It is possible that they also know some better ways to do it, but there are reasons that they are doing things certain way because there has been some regulatory blockers, there has been some past incidents that has happened, right? Because of which they choose to do it in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just being more aware about the surroundings in your own domain that you are working in. Yeah.
absolutely. It's more about one change at a time rather than pushing to change everything at once.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot, Neeraj. Thanks to the both of you for coming today and talking in depth about collections. And it's a topic not covered by many, and I'm so glad we discussed this. To everybody watching this conversation, thanks a lot for watching it, and we'll be posting a lot of insights, a lot of shorts around this. So if you want, you can check out our other conversations on our YouTube playlist called Sales and Onboarding. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.